All right. For those who see me for the first time, I run a marketplace of edit engineers called Lemon.io. For quite some time, me and my co-founders were debating whether we could grow our revenue by not just offering freelancers to our customers, but also hiring those developers internally, offering them to our clients as a regular dev shop, because dev shops have much higher margins. I also participated in this group of marketplace owners, and they had a call where they invited Chris Baki to speak, and he's mentioned that at 42 Floors, they have increased their revenue dramatically when instead of sending the leads to outside agents, they started hiring those agents and processing those leads internally. I sent a cold email to him after the call, and I asked him his opinion on our problem, our debate. He offered a call that I recorded. At this call, we speak about this question, and he gave us a great advice about the business model and our pricing. And for me, it was just 25 minutes of pure gold. And I hope that you also can find this interesting. Okay, so here we go.
What are you doing on the like sales and distribution standpoint? Because my initial take is like um, your GMV is super impressive, but it's like that's ultimately the thing that you just want to like drive that up as far as possible. I mean, you're making like optimizations that right now will have a ceiling, right? Like going from, a whatever it ends up being 20-25% take rate to a 40-45-50% take rate, maybe all the way up to 60%. But the focus of like doing all of that extra work to bring people in house, doing all the extra legal, like I think if you think that that is like the lever that like pushes GMV up, then I think it's interesting. Um, but what are you doing, I guess, like on the marketing and sales side today? And do you think that that's like a big differentiator, that if you went to clients and you were able to pull from a larger pool of people, right? Because you're now employing people, um, and maybe you're able to offer like a higher level of support, you're able to get a higher quality, person to come on board. But is all of that enough to then turn that around to clients and say, like, we've done all these steps and we've brought things in house? Because I mean, right now you're making this like fairly minor optimization for an extra, like $50,000 a month, $40,000 a month, like whatever that like incremental revenue ends up being, which is great. But ultimately, like over the next 5 years, it feels like there's the challenge of like, how do you differentiate? And that's like a marketing and distribution and sales challenge, not a hiring in house versus freelance challenge.
Mhm. I don't think this will make any difference on the marketing. Um, let me put it another way. So our message to the world is we will connect you with individuals that we have a um, um, very high accuracy of them being successful,
Hmm.
meaning that they are good developers, and you will add them to your team. So this is not like you're outsourcing, you're adding, they're
Yep.
remote, they're offshore. Of course, they're
Yep.
not your team because it's different, but still like they're like your team. They're kind of extension. Like in some cases they would hire someone to make the MVP, but this is a rare case. In most cases, they just, okay, I'm a CTO and I just need to delegate like front end work to someone,
Hmm.
or I need to delegate to be just running faster, or they've had a round of investment and just need to show faster results, and they're hiring.
Yep.
So if we want to keep doing this, if we start hiring uh, internally, this we don't want to change anything in the marketing. We don't want to tell them this is in-house. I mean, we will tell them this in-house, but not in the marketing. So it will
Yep.
not help us probably drive more customers to drive the
Hmm.
GMV. Maybe again, better conversion rate. It's an assumption. I don't know if it's true. It's an assumption, but not dramatically on the demand side. If
Right.
we wanna change this in the marketing, this is a totally different business, because someone who is coming for outsourcing company, it's a different company. It's probably
Hmm.
a enterprise solution people, and they don't want to work with individuals, so they want to work with teams. They want to work with the product management, with the project management, with the account manager, and all these layers of people that we don't have and we don't want to build, because this will be a classic outsourcing company that is just not the business we want to build.
Right. Makes sense. And is the stuff are how like repeatable and predictable are the projects that you're doing today? I think you mentioned in the beginning you're doing a lot of like low level WordPress type work. You're getting away from that. You're going to, better projects, it sounds like, both from a financial standpoint and a development standpoint. But I guess, are you getting this stream of like, build a like lead capture site, or build an initial marketplace, or build like, I guess, like how templatized are these? Like when I think about your business, I think of like how Gigster started out. I don't know how familiar you are, but like they kind of had these like out of the box things that you were like, we build these like 4 things, and then they added like 6 things, and then 8 things. And it was like, there's a price, there's a timeline of like how fast you need this built. But it sounds like your model is much more like dropping an individual or maybe 2 individuals kind of with that team, versus like completely just doing like 100% of the dev work for like a marketplace or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah. Instead of building projects, we have them, extend their teams actually.
Mm-hmm. And what are the big challenges on the growth side? Because I mean, it feels like that again. I mean, I think the decision to bring in-house versus not is certainly an optimization. I think that there is. I agree with you that there's definitely an argument to be made that I think is actually a strong argument around interview prep. Like if you can control the narrative better with somebody who is like in-house and is employed by you guys, helping that person look really good as a candidate, and also like building out resources. So like when they go interview or have that conversation, or when somebody looks at their CV or like whatever that is, it's much higher quality than they would be if they were a freelancer. And I think that like, trying that experiment is pretty easy. Like, I think the thing here is like you said it in the beginning yourself, like you don't have to fully commit to something right now. I think it's very easy to, split the difference for a couple months and say, we're going to bring in 5 people. We're treated as an experiment over the next 90 days. We're going to look at the win rate of these 5 people. We're going to do a ton of like hacky back end stuff to make these people look really good and really like push and sell their skills hard. And we're going to compare that to our freelancer base. And, if your assumptions, I mean, this just seems like an area of like test the assumptions, right? Like if your assumptions are true and take rate goes up and it becomes easier to sell them and they interview better, then I think it's like a no-brainer. If you have to add a lot of, overhead and support and management and legal costs and, tax costs, HR costs, whatever to do that, then it's more of a trade-off of like, are there other kind of like intangible things that we're, trying to achieve by having them in-house that's not cost related? And the answer to that is probably no. Like it doesn't make sense at that point. But if the margin's there and you can sustain it without having to hire a ton of, admin people and, and bring in extra services and legal costs to do it, then I think I personally think it makes a lot of sense without knowing, every nook and cranny of the business.
Yeah, it makes sense. And maybe even not do I'm just thinking while you talk, maybe not even do the actual hiring people, but maybe take 5 freelancers who don't seem really good and maybe do a boot camp of, making them really good, like a month of prep of like, maybe English lessons, or maybe just, communication, because most of the project they fail not because, they're not good coders or they don't think as, in solutions, but just because of the bad communication. They don't know how to, simple things like if they want to take a day off, they wouldn't tell about this, or if they're late with the deadline, they would tell after the deadline instead of like taking, saying like 2 days before that. Regular account management, for us it's very obvious, for them it's like, total different world. They don't know about this anything. So maybe even instead of hiring them, maybe to take few people who will do prep for free. Not every month, maybe like do a boot camp for a couple of weeks and just prep them and see like what are the results with the
Yep.
freelancers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good experiment. At scale, the question is, I worked at my last company, we worked pretty closely with Upwork. And there's always this balance that I think is tricky with freelance. And I mean, certainly less so with your own employees. But I mean, with freelance, it's really tough because I think that makes sense as an experiment. And it's a great experiment if you're just trying to say, like, are there basic educational programs and training and classes and polish that we can put on this person to make him or her present better. The challenge with that is, like, there's companies that have done this with freelance, and usually what ends up happening is, like, the nature of freelance is like, cool, I'll come here, I'll take this 1 month free boot camp, I'll work a bunch of projects, I'll like learn how to communicate better, and then I'll go somewhere else where I now I'm valued. So I think that there has to be, I don't think it matters in the beginning because you're experimenting. I think long term with programs like that, it's worth thinking through, like, the value capture. Like, I don't know what your, like, attrition or your churn or your turnover of freelancers is today. And if it's like super low, it's probably not a problem. But I think if I were you, I would totally do what you just said. I would, like, do the boot camp, and then I would think really hard about, like, does this actually lead to more loyalty or more, like, stickiness, or outside of, like, do these people get more projects, which I think that they will. Are they better teammates? I think they will be. But, like, is there long-term loyalty, or is there, like, long-term revenue capture that you can actually, like, tangibly measure the efficiency or the efficacy of that program? Because I think that that's going to be one of the hard pieces about training and upskilling freelancers for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's everything. It's not just freelancers, even your own employees. I know that it's maybe different in the US because people stick maybe better to jobs, but over here, like, I know in outsourcing companies, developers just go from project to project very easily, and, like, someone offers, like, a little bit better jobs, or a little bit better project, or a little bit more money, and people just jump from project to project. So
right. And how long, I guess, is there differentiation with other platforms around the length that most developers stay with you guys, like, on a project? Like, on Upwork, is the average project, like, 30 days for developers, and with you guys it's like 180 days? Like, how do you kind of benchmark success rate of like how long you're able to charge that take rate for? Do you guys think about that?
Not really. This is a good question. We never measure that. But I think I counted this, and this might be around, like, 9 months. They get comfy because the prices are really low. I mean, even comparing to other platforms, like, we are sometimes 30, sometimes even 40% lower than the rest of the market. It's
right.
Comparing to other platforms that do the same, like the same developers, maybe different regions, but the same developers.
I think in a lot of cases with pricing, it ends up being value-based pricing, right? So it's like, what I mean by that is, like, especially with talent, if you show me 2 developers and one costs, the equivalent of, like, $30,000 a year, and then the other one costs, like, $90,000 a year, I'm like, well, the $90,000 guy is clearly, like, way better. Like, that's why you're charging $90,000 for him. And so I think some of this is, like, the positioning of quality to skill. It obviously has to be there, but if your process is, like, consistently improving around assessing and weeding out, and especially training, like, if you get into the boot camp stuff, and you're putting all of this, like, investment in, I mean, I think the goal is you try to extract as much of that short term as you can. And I mean, I think that there's ways that you can split the difference, right? So I mean, you don't have to I mean, publicly change things on the site. I mean, I think I saw on your site you have, like, $35 to $55 an hour, and then you have this, like, CTO add-on component. But I think you can run tests, which is like, this is the price for, there's like an introductory price, right? And that lasts the first 30 days or 45 days or 90 days or something. And then for projects, maybe the fee goes up, or vice versa. Like, honestly, maybe you start, maybe what you start doing is you add a disclaimer to the site, which is like, these prices in this range of $35 to $55 an hour are for projects that last over 120 or 180 days. So if you're going to hire, one of our people to come in for a 2-week or 4-week or 6-week project, you're going to pay $70 an hour, right? Or 75. And maybe you're already doing that, but I think playing with like, the initial discount versus like the length of time versus pricing that ramps up over time, pricing that ramps down over time. I mean, very commonly in like business process outsourcing, slightly different, but I mean, very commonly it's based on, the total number of hours that you're procuring, essentially, right? So somebody who's procuring a virtual assistant for a short, task is going to end up paying a 2 or 3x higher hourly rate than somebody who's doing something a little bit longer term.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I wasn't experimenting with this yet.
Mm-hmm.
We actually, our average developer is not average. I wouldn't say average, but let's say senior Node.js React developer would probably cost around 85K per year.
Yep.
So it's not
Makes a lot of
30.
sense.
Yeah, it's not 30.
Yep.
But yeah, maybe rising prices at some not because, as I told you, like our value decreases in time. And even though like we spend all those money, like if we give them one developer, probably there's like at least 20, 30, sometimes 50 developers we turn down, and we spend time with them and we advertise with, for them. And bringing developers is pretty expensive and very competitive.
Right.
So they don't know that there's this value. They just see the developer who's successful with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like after 3 months, they think, okay, well, I'm paying this company. And sometimes clients try to go, around and try to offer them work directly. And maybe it's a good thing to say, like, first 90 days, this is the price, and then it decreases, and then you can opt out with this fee.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to capture. You have you basically, I mean, you go into this saying, for a client, we, like, the company's take rate. I think thinking about it in total dollars of take rate versus like a percentage over time is a lot more interesting. And so, this is an extreme example, but if you say for the average project, like it costs us X dollars to acquire a client, the on average, or maybe like the median is 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever the actual median is. And we have some projects that go a year and a half and some projects that go 2 weeks. But all we care about, like our business model, is hyper focused on collecting $10,000 or $20,000, or like whatever the math is there. And then you don't care like about the rest. And so if you've collected, $10,000 or $20,000 on an 18-month engagement after 6 months, like, your fee goes down to 5% or 10%, or like something that you like don't even care about, because it's like we've what is actually, I'll use your company as an analogy. We've like, squeezed all the juice out of this lemon, and we don't care about the extra 5%. And on a short-term project, it's like, this is how you get out of the short-term project work, which is like 2-week project's going to cost you like 30 grand because we want our 15 grand of it, or whatever, our 15,000. So I think thinking about it in terms of total value extraction, it will like force you out of like the short, like junky projects, and it will focus you on like longer term stuff. I mean, it's one way of thinking about it.
How to think of this take rate? To think of this client wise or developer wise, because it's two sides of the story. If we can, if developer will work with this client for, I don't know, 3 months, we can give it, and usually we do, like we give them another project. So how would
I think you have to look at it as both. I mean, my initial sense is like, again, I mean, it's really about the business that you want to run. I think like, I think it's pretty critical to measure both. Like what you don't, I mean, again, using extremes, what you don't want, certainly on the developer side, right, is to like invest even in like very basic screening and onboarding for somebody who's only going to last 2 months or 3 months. So you certainly want to think about basically like the lifetime value of a developer. And I think doing at least like rough math, rough estimates around that is really critical, because that will teach you, going back to your previous point, like how much do we invest, like how much can we afford to invest in training? How much can we afford to invest in like better hiring or assessments? Like how much can we afford to actually like bring our best people in house and pay, for extra, fees and overhead costs and, HR stuff and management and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, I would say probably at this stage, thinking about like lifetime value of developers is more important.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like in your business, like I would at this phase, I would start to get very interested in finding, multiple projects to work on with a company, and really trying to figure out like what that longer term value extraction is. Because I imagine in this industry that, finding a single customer is relatively expensive, right? Like, and then you're actually like getting over that hump. And so of like, do they trust us as a company? Do they trust the developer?
Yeah.
And so once you've gotten past that, like the rest should be great, which is like right now, I think as the company grows, maybe it's hard to figure out what there is to sell there. But I think coming up with something to sell them on an ongoing basis after that first person comes in, does 9 months and then leaves, if the company has a board or the company has a founder who's like, look, we want to move away from offshore, whatever, like I would just take that loss and I wouldn't think twice about it. But like really thinking deeply about like all of your customers where, a developer comes in for 6 months and the developer's like, that was great. And the company's like, that was great. And then you guys like part ways, like there should really be something, whether that's moving up market or additional like services or additional like things that you should be brainstorming, because like you've already won that client over. And by the way, as they grow, like long term, all the value add is in, figuring out how to keep that relationship with them until they're, 50 plus or 100 plus people, because that's when they start making real money. And so, the nature of like SMB and small business sales is great because it's often like easier to find and acquire customers. But like, there's also, like you said, I mean, these big, these big staffing firms, these big BPOs, they would kill to like be able to identify customers when they're only, 2 developers or 5 developers or whatever, and like build that relationship over time. So again, you may not have the product today, you may not have the service today, but I would think a lot about like how we create something to extract value versus just like a one-off project basis.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Because you've already done the hard work of finding the company who like needs, development help.
Yeah. We haven't been able to, and to work on these relationships. I mean, a lot of clients would come for the second, third developer through time as they grow, or like switch from one developer to developer because they need a different skill. But yeah, we were never able to think of how we retain them and how we develop their relation. This is a good point. Thank you very much. I would think about this. Thank you so much. You gave me so much time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy to. Keep me posted on how everything goes, and glad we got to meet. I like I said, I love the site branding and everything that you're doing, and so let me know.
You got a lot of attention with it, so
yeah, it's good.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. You have a great day.
Yep. Talk soon.
Bye.